I'm Julianna Forlano. You're watching ActTV. The president has been spreading conspiracy theories, no kidding, about supposed Antifa infiltrators, apparently without knowing much about the loosely organized group of democracy-preserving activists, which is what they are. Conservatives should be scared of Antifa, just not for the reasons that Trump is implying. Writer Josh Holland is here with us to explain. Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Julianna. I appreciate it.
So your piece, here's the real reason so many on the right are terrified of Antifa, comes out to talk about what is so scary to conservatives about Antifa. What is so scary to conservatives about it?
Well, I mean, so Antifa activists do go and, do street fights with Proud Boys in these kind of carefully orchestrated, dramatic clashes in liberal enclaves like Berkeley and Portland. But I,
Portland, yes.
but I think there's something else going on, which is that the most effective Antifa work is done by nerds behind a computer, like me right now, a nerd behind a computer. Um, it is kind of scouring the fever swamps of the far right on the internet, finding out who people are who are shit posting anonymously, and exposing them, doxing them. Basically, the idea is to attach a social cost to membership in far right extremist groups, and
It's working, yes?
it is effective. Now, I should say that it is not as effective with the hardcore right wing terrorist groups. What it's very effective against is the kind of softer far right, the so called alt right, people who want to live, respectable lives in the mainstream of society, basically. And what they do is they expose them to employers, to neighbors, to communities, et cetera, et cetera. Every time you see a news story of a police officer being terminated for being part of the Proud Boys, for example, or a 3%er or an oath keeper or whatever, or a service member being discharged for ties to far right extremist organizations, or school teachers losing their jobs teaching children, et cetera, et cetera. That is almost always the result of this kind of sleuthing. I was actually involved in tangentially involved with one of these exposés just last week, where this guy who is a very explicit racist, anti-Semite, misogynist, homophobe, et cetera.
You're usually not just one of those things without the others.
They do tend to go together. Yeah, they do. They're it's like peanut butter and jelly. Various forms of bigotry. Yeah, it is rare to see someone else like I'm just a bigot in this one. I just hate.
I really love LGBT
just hate
women,
Jews,
but I hate
love all the rest of them. So he had retweeted something that I had said with some comment, but he was a school teacher. He was a middle school teacher in an overwhelmingly Black community. So he was teaching kids that he thought were subhuman. And
yeah, I know someone who is a priest. I probably shouldn't say this. Who is in like an all Latino place that supports Trump's immigration policy, which includes keeping Latino kids in fucking cages.
Yeah,
a little bit mind blowing.
Yeah, it's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah,
but I mean,
that's
so
it.
look,
I'm
we
just
can
invited to the family dinner.
and we can debate the ethics of doxing. That's a tactic that can be used against people we like just as well as it can be used against loathsome people. I tend to think that when you support an ethnic state, when you support white supremacy, that is delegitimizing the existence of other Americans, and therefore I don't consider that normal politics. I don't think that that's like believing in that tax cuts create jobs or whatever like that. And you should have some social cost. We don't regulate these views. We don't allow the government to say, "Oh, you can't be a neo-Nazi," because we have a First Amendment. So Attaching a stigma to that, attaching again a social and professional cost to those beliefs, are, I think, in the end, salutary.
Josh, talk about doxing specifically for people who might not know. Everyone knows, everyone has the awareness, or most people have the awareness that it's just putting these people's general information out into the world, including sometimes their address,
Yeah.
etc. Can you talk about what it means beyond that?
Well, I shouldn't say it's just doxing, because what they do is they spend a lot of time deplatforming people. So they'll call, first of all, doxing is what you just said. It's where you expose somebody's real information, their real personal information. But and Antifa activists do a lot of, calling up venues and saying, "Do you know that you're hosting this group, this white supremacist? Do you know what this group is?" And they get them kicked off of social media platforms. They'll report them to social media platforms whose terms of services they violate, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the things the point that I made in that piece is that this strategy of attaching a cost to loathsome speech, it fits very well with a long held view within the conservative movement that freedom of speech does not mean simply that the government doesn't regulate what you say. They believe that freedom of speech includes the freedom to speak without consequences, to speak without blowback, to not lose a platform, to not lose a publishing gig, to not get thrown off of a social media platform by a private company. This has been something that the mainstream
You don't
conservative
understand
movement.
capitalism.
I mean, the mainstream conservative movement has said this for a very, very long time, right? So, and this is it's a common theme on Fox News and among conservative pundits and whatnot. They conflate efforts to hold people accountable for what they say by private actors with censorship. So I think that
But if you're not the government, you're literally allowed to censor. I could censor, right? I
it,
mean,
it isn't censorship. The thing is that say that you have a social media company and you have terms of service that say, in our view, this kind of speech is not acceptable on our platform. That's not censorship at all. So it's not even that private actors can censor. That's just not what censorship means.
right. It has to be the
Yeah,
government.
yeah, and when it comes, and they also believe this when it comes to boycotts. It's illegitimate to boycott people for speaking out, for disagreeing, is the way that they put it. But when you boycott a company for being, in your view, supporting something offensive, that is actually an exercise of your own free speech, right?
Josh, we have a comment coming in from the chat that I think I'd love to hear your feedback on.
Yeah,
I'm sure I'm gonna my Silapis. I'm sure I've got that name wrong, but it's a lot of letters and vowels all smashed together.
sure.
Says the following: I believe U.S. anti-fascists play too much on terms of fascists. Don't get provoked by their provocations, etc. Asymmetrical warfare isn't really rocket science. You just make your own rules how to engage with them. They back down pretty fast. They are fascists because they they are fearful, mostly anyway, is what the quote was. Your thoughts about that, about anti-fascism isn't pro something.
Well, I mean, it is. Yeah, yes, they are anti-fascism, right? So this
It's
is a
funny how the Proud Boys get so pissed off when they come with sticks and clubs and guns and bullshit, and then when someone comes to fight them, they're like, oh, as if their right to be aggressive and abrasive
yeah.
is above they're just
Well,
shocked when someone
look,
else shows up.
Juliana, I mean, there has been a fairly rigorous debate on the left, the broad left, about the utility and ethics of street fighting. There's certainly not universal agreement that going and fighting them in the streets is a productive thing to do. Um, but this is a movement that has a clear philosophy that you need to nip this in the bud, and they believe that if you let fascism take root and gain the upper hand in government, for example, it's too late to fight them. So you have to fight it early when it's a rising movement. And this is something that they learned, back in the 20s and 30s before we had a global war, early 30s, before we had a
Yeah.
global war against fascism. That there was a time earlier on when it would have been appropriate to confront them,
The
and to
silent
confront them
chaos.
as you must.
Silent Chaos in our Twitch chat says that they believe their team is in power and that provides them a share of the monopoly on violence.
Which
The
believes
other
their
guys,
team?
the Proud
Yeah,
Boys people.
yeah. Well, look, I think that one thing that we shouldn't let get lost in this conversation is that we've seen an extraordinary amount of far right violence in response to these George Floyd protests. Two men were arrested for murdering two police officers in California in separate attacks. They wounded 5 other police officers. There was the shooting in New Mexico just the other day. A far right militia member shot some who had been provoking protesters who were pulling down a statue of a rather nasty conquistador. And 3 men were indicted this week in Nevada for trying to agitate from within protests and blame protesters. Basically, they had explosives, they had Molotov cocktails, they were these members of this boogaloo movement. um, we've seen all these videos of white, very focused white people going in and breaking windows and then walking away. Who knows what those people's interests are?
How
But
is it? What happens when the cops get hurt by the white nationalists? Isn't like it's white on white crime, white nationalists on white nationalist crime? I mean, what that must blow their minds.
I mean, it's we shouldn't joke about it, because honestly, they are.
We have to joke.
If you include sovereign citizens, they are responsible for a string of murders of police officers in recent years.
Yeah, that's bad.
A significant number of cops have been killed by these far right extremists, and yet they do tend to be very friendly with them when they police them at protests. We should also note that despite the rhetoric coming from the White House and from Fox News, and even worse, the One America News Network, which is just insane.
Oh, I just saw a report on them saying that a lot of them are actually liberals who are working.
How can they even do that? I don't know how that they can survive. So basically, they're saying, yeah, I read the same story, that
I
all the
don't
people
know.
in the San Diego newsroom. They're all. He said there was a few hardcore conservatives, but they're mostly liberals. That's selling your soul in a big way. I can't even imagine it. But we should keep in mind that since the end of the Vietnam War era, when there was a significant amount of serious left-wing violence, the far right has had a near monopoly on serious political violence in this country. There have been 2 exceptions where, and I'm talking about not punching people, I'm talking about shooting people, I'm talking about blowing things up. There have been 2 exceptions to that over the last since really 1980. It has almost all been from the far right, and the FBI has finally gotten around to state explicitly that these people are the source of most domestic terror in this country. So
How are Trump's echoing of conspiracy theories influencing people who believe him? Are we seeing people take actions relative to his tweets that maybe they wouldn't otherwise?
it is hard to it's hard to isolate it as Trump's tweets. I would say that the frenzy within the entire conservative ecosystem has absolutely caused a number of panics in right wing America. There was a piece just the other day, I forgot where it was published, about the influence of Facebook on these small rural towns that have had these rumors that Antifa mobs of Antifa, like murderous thugs, were being bussed in from inner cities. I guess it's a kind of a dog whistle, and they've had a number of complete freakouts over this. There was a bus full of, they had like painted their bus like hippie colors, and it was some artist collective. They were held at gunpoint by SWAT members. There was the family that was just trying to go camping. I believe it was Washington State, but they were, I don't remember which state it was. I think it was Washington State, but they were this mixed race family. They were just trying to go camping. It was like a family of five, and the townspeople um, basically barricaded them in. They heard these shots in the distance. They tried to leave. These people felled trees over the road to keep them trapped in there. There was a incident in Florida where
I'm horrified.
it's, I
How
mean,
did they get
even
out?
near
Did they
me,
get out?
even
What happened? I missed it.
so some young people in town were like, okay, grandpa's been watching too much Fox News or too many Facebook things, and they freed them.
Oh,
They cleared the road so that they
thank
could get
God.
out.
Oh my God.
There was a town in Florida where rumors went around that these again buses of rioters were on their way. So they closed down Main Street. They boarded up all the store windows, and one 80-year-old woman came out and protested. She had a little Black Lives Matter sign, and police said they were monitoring the situation. This has happened across the country. Near me, actually, they closed down a mall a couple of weeks ago in Poughkeepsie, New York, and they boarded everything up because they thought riotous Antifa people were on their way. Now, I should just state for the record, there are probably, it's unclear to me if Antifa activists number in the thousands in this country. Maybe it's the low thousands, probably the hundreds.
I mean, why do you have to have, it's crazy that it's like Antifa activists. We've had Code Pink. They've been fighting against fascism, under another guise. We have,
Yeah,
the Greenpeace people. We have people who are fighting fascism. They
yeah.
just don't necessarily wear the label.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point because a lot of people who are doing that anti-fascist work may not identify with the group.
It seems like just the fact that Trump is saying like it's Antifa, he's black masks. You know what I mean? People, he's creating another
Yeah,
boogeyman.
it's a boogeyman. It's a boogeyman. Well, yeah, I mean, a large part of this is to delegitimize the protests. I mean, that is the point of the exaggerated violence. There have been scattered incidents of looting and vandalism early in these protests. It's been not a consistent thing at all. There's been so many more entirely peaceful protests than anything bad happening. You would never know that watching Fox News. It's just all cities being burned all the time.
Yeah.
It's absolutely nonsense.
Even the other news. It's not just Fox. It's
It,
the
it
other one.
isn't. It isn't. Yes, it has creeped into the mainstream thing, and one of the big problems is that different things are being conflated. So, just as not everybody who does anti-fascist work considers themselves a member of Antifa, it is also the case that you know many people who do consider themselves Antifa don't don't do black bloc protests. They don't dress up in black and wear masks and
Right.
go fight with Proud Boys in the streets. They just don't do that. And then there's the fact that a significant number of people who do put on a mask and go fight with Proud Boys are not Antifa, right?
Guys.
They're young people who think it's cool to go tangle with Nazis, and
Oof.
they're anti-fascist in the sense that they're obviously out, to tussle with fascists, but they may not. I mean, it's often the case that they're not. They don't understand the philosophy behind Antifa. They don't know its history. They're not really Antifa.
Getting down to semantics. Antifa stands for anti-fascist. So if you're not in Antifa, on some level, even
So
in
you're Antifa or you're Profa. There's really no neutral fa.
if you're neutral fra, then you're profa.
You're kind of
right?
pro-fa. Yeah, you should probably be just Antifa.
Do
That's probably the best way
people
to
who
go.
are pro-fa
Listen, I
are
mean,
they do they
my grandfather was Antifa, right? 45th Infantry Division.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I'm only saying that because my grandfather fought in the Second World War under Mussolini.
Profa. That's Profa.
Just saying, he was one
Yeah.
of the very poor from the
My
South.
my my grandpa was on
I'm
the
just saying.
Antifa side of that, and
Oh,
he actually did fight in Italy. That maybe our grandfathers fought.
no, mine was a prisoner of war in Egypt, thank God,
Okay.
where he said he was treated very well. Anyway,
Yeah. The
long
Antifa
story.
side are better than the Profa side
He
in
just
terms of treating
didn't
their
know. He
prisoners.
was like, "Ooh, a paycheck to feed my starving family. I'll
Yeah.
join the military." I don't
Yeah.
think he, you know,
Yeah.
was deep into the ideology, or at
Yeah.
least that's how I will paint him on this show.
Sure.
I didn't know. I don't know.
I mean, listen, every older German person I ever met was part of the White Rose. So.
Um, so what do these the other final question, I'm really enjoying this discussion, Josh. Um, do do the do the pro-fas, do the Proud Boys, do they embrace the term fascist as a plus?
um, I mean, the Proud Boys would insist
Proud
that
of what?
I mean, they insist that they're guardians of Western chauvinism, and that
Ugh!
they are extremely offended when you call them racists, and I guess they've had some people of color in their ranks. So no, I don't think they admit to being fascists at all. I mean, one of the tricks that a lot of these organizations use is to claim that they're being victims because they're mainstream conservatives. I mean, that's every time, some neo-Nazi group gets deplatformed, they say, "Oh, this is discrimination against conservatives," as if they're just mainstream, Republicans or whatever.
Josh Holland,
They don't,
thank you.
as if
Yeah,
they don't hold abhorrent, bigoted views.
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know. I can't even get over
which
there.
is kind of mainstream in the Republican Party at this point, but that's a whole other segment.
I well, we'll have you back. What's coming up on the podcast this week?
We are going to be talking to Parker Malloy of Media Matters about how the conservative press is not taking all of this well.
Awesome. Josh Holland, thanks for joining us. Josh, the podcast is called We've Got Issues. When does it come out?
It comes out tonight at midnight.
So if you haven't had enough here, get up, stay up all night,
Yeah,
or wake up early, which is
wake
what
up early.
I
Yeah,
play you in the morning on my Alexa thing. It's great.
I never listen to the show. I hate listening
No,
to the
you
show.
can't listen to your own show.
No, I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah.
But other people like it, and that's the main thing.
And that's thanks
All
a lot.
right, Juliana. Thank you so much.
Follow Josh on Twitter at Joshua Hall, HOL. Also, check out his podcast, We've Got Issues. That's it for our stream on Facebook, and that's it for our interview here on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. You'll get more of me. You'll get some of James. You'll get some cool cartoons from our guy, Alex Sikaya, who did that awesome cartoon that's like got 34 gajillion views now about systemic racism shared by all kinds of famous people. Thank you for the boost to his work. Anyway, thanks for watching. Definitely subscribe to us on YouTube. I will see you on Monday morning on Facebook. And if you want more of this, join us now on Twitch because I'll be there for a little bit longer. We're a little more casual there, more get to know each other there, more like a community of people making media there. So come over, twitch.tv/act.tv. You don't need an account. You can just come over and be there. Thanks everyone for watching. So long on Facebook. Don't forget to share the stream. And I hope you have a peaceful, productive weekend.